Welcome to the fourth Scouching Report for the 2020 NHL Draft. Today we're going to be looking at HIFK Helsinki center Anton Lundell. Lundell was recently ranked 4th amongst European skaters by NHL Central Scouting, and he does to some seem to be a more polarizing player within the top 10 of this year's draft, so let's kind of dig into him a little bit. If this is your first time watching a Scouching Report, the way we break down a player's game is looking at 5 different categories: think, move, get, pass, and shoot. Within each one of those categories, we give them a number and a letter grade, where the number from 1 to 4 indicates the overall tier that I saw across the 7 games that I tracked of the player, and the letter indicates the overall level of consistency that I saw within that tier. So to get things started, we look at the think category. And this to me already is where Anton Lundell absolutely shines. He probably is one of the most responsible and intelligent players in this entire draft class. He's an extremely reliable player at both ends of the ice, doing all kinds of little things to keep play moving in the right direction. He's no nonsense, there isn't a ton of flash to his game, but he doesn't really need to have flash to his game. He's just a quietly effective center with a ton of efficiency, especially in his own zone. For a young center, he was extremely well refined in terms of shutting down cycles in his own end, continuing offensive cycles when his team had the puck in the offensive end, and it was just stuff that you don't really see a tremendous amount out of young centers at this age, especially playing against men in Finland. There are many reasons why Anton Lundell was the second highest shot attempt percentage of all players who played the full season in the Finnish Liga this year. That is a men's pro league that is not a joke, and he was one of the best possession players in the league at 18 years old. While he does a lot of things at a very high level that are very small and really well refined, there are some inconsistencies in this regard, maybe not moving his feet quite enough to stop transitions coming against him. 52% of the time they were done with control, which I would call about mediocre, but many times you think he's out of the play or not back-checking hard enough or not forechecking hard enough, but there he is, and then he does something where he's continuing to push play positively. So in the think category, I'm giving Lundell a 1B. We're kind of getting the best part of his game out of the way early here, but I really don't know how else to cut it. He's an exceptional thinker for the game, especially defensively. He's responsible, he's efficient, he doesn't try to do too much on his own, he makes good passing decisions more often than not, and when you take into context his age, the role he's playing on his team, and how good his team was at maintaining possession and how well he fit into that system, he certainly has cemented himself as a top option in this year's draft for a center. Next up we have the move category, and this is where people have brought up some questions about Lundell's projectability as a center in the National Hockey League. I'm not always the person who's willing to discount a player just based on their skating. I certainly value mobility in skating in general, but guys like Bobby Brink last year weren't necessarily the most fantastic skaters, but I still valued them very highly. However, Bobby Brink was a player that ended up going in the early 2nd round and probably should have been a 1st round pick, but was certainly not a player seen as a rock-solid option in the top 10. If Anton Lundell falls out of the top 10, that would be a pretty massive drop if you ask most people in this world. He is older for this draft class, and while he isn't necessarily the quickest or most agile skater available in the draft this year, he is one of these guys where you actually have to time him going around the ice. At one point in my tracking work, I clocked Anton Lundell going blue line to blue line in about 1.75 seconds, which I would say is the quicker side of average. It doesn't look like he's really moving around the ice with a tremendous amount of speed and efficiency, but he's kinda still doing it with a lot of speed. So there may be some eyeballs being fooled by a bit of an awkward stride and maybe a lack of agility here. And again, he isn't consistently this extremely quick blue line to blue line player. This only happened a couple of times, but at the end of the day, he's the type of player that doesn't really need to be burning his way around the ice. He's more about anticipating play, trying to stay ahead of where the puck is and is going to be, and trying to push play offensively and adapting to the situation around him. So in the move category, I'm giving Lundell a 2B. This might be a little bit low for what people might anticipate for a top pick, but I don't think it really needs to factor into his overall game as much as it might for some other players. The 2 also stems from maybe his hands not being super great. He looks a little bit awkward moving out of his own zone and moving pucks up the ice into the offensive zone, and I have seen him losing control of pucks at speeds that he probably shouldn't be losing puck control at, and he is not the fastest guy from a shift-to-shift basis, but he is efficient. He's not going to waste a ton of energy burning his legs out as a center constantly, and he is more focused on defensive back checks rather than pushing offensive pace a tremendous amount. He's more about adapting to what's going on around him and using more of a thinking man's game rather than this speed demon type of player that you're seeing a lot in the National Hockey League these days. Next up, we have the get category, and this is another area where Lundell really does show up. He's one of a few players in this year's top 10 that I just feel gets it. He wins puck battles a lot more often than he loses them. He knocks pucks down out of the air in the neutral zone to stop transitions. He can play physical along the boards. And while he can get hemmed down with his lack of explosivity in his step and maybe his lack of hands and skill, he does manage to battle and get those pucks back and get them to teammates to continue those offensive cycles. He's not going to really give up when pucks get taken off of him, and he's not really out of the play for a tremendous amount of time in transition and in either end of the ice. But there is one small caveat to all of this loveliness surrounding Anton Lundell. While he was the second highest shot attempt percentage player in the Finnish Liga amongst players that played the full season, when you remove low danger shot attempts from the equation, his shot attempt percentage went from a 51% to a 47%. 47% is a number that I would categorize as not great for a center who has such a great overall shot attempt percentage, but it does go back to his projectability and his potential. That's what you have to keep in mind when you're drafting prospects. His brain is in the right place. His skills away from the puck are certainly in the right place, and I think this is an area that is going to benefit him greatly as the years go by. So in the get category, I'm giving Lundell another 1B. This is another area of the game that you really don't see at a high level in young players quite often. He's a really special talent in terms of getting pucks back when he doesn't have them. Whether it's in transition, in the defensive zone, or the offensive zone, if he does not have the puck, which was somewhat often, he's always trying to either help his teammates maintain possession of the puck or himself getting involved in trying to get pucks back. Next up, we have the pass category, and this is where things get a little bit hairy for me with Anton Lundell. He only managed to complete 67% of his passes, which is a lot lower than I would like for a center. I look for my centers to be reliable passers just as much as your defensemen. They need to be able to move pucks up the ice effectively and with control. It makes life a lot harder when you're not able to hit your teammates with passes. A lot of that might be due to the fact that he's young and playing against men in Finland, and there were other parts of his game that kind of masked his inability to complete a pass at a super high level. The one thing he does with his passing that I don't see a tremendous amount with a lot of the other players in this range is just these little tip passes. Pucks will hit him in the neutral zone. He'll look like he's just about to get pinned against the boards and lose possession of the puck, but he'll position his stick in such a way that he just pops that puck out into the neutral zone and a teammate picks it up for an entry into the offensive zone. It's another one of those little things that leads to a lot of positive potential when it comes to playing hockey. He can avoid stopping play and getting pucks pinned against the boards if he's able to just free loose pucks up before that encounter even happens. I saw it happen often enough to make note of it for this video, and I think that that's something that you see in the NHL with a lot of players who have a lot more experience than Lundell. It's another part of this aspect where he kind of just gets the game. He's not really trying to do too much, and he's not selfish with or without the puck. He just wants to continue pushing play positively, and moves like that really push things positively. So in the pass category, I'm giving him a 1D. To summarize his passing game in a word, I'd probably say discretion. Moving pucks in a straight line across blue lines, yeah, he might be a little bit inconsistent and might miss his targets a little bit, but when facing a lot of pressure and maybe not in the best position to move pucks up the ice on his own stick, he does all these little things to get pucks to his teammates and continue the possession. It's something that you kind of have to look for, and I think that a lot of coaches will really like it moving forward. It's these little things that in the NHL you certainly need to have as a quality in any player on the ice. Play unselfishly and just keep possession of the puck. Next up, we have the shoot category. I don't think Lundell is going to be a 30 goal scorer in the NHL anytime soon. At least I don't see that as likely. Just 6% of his shot attempts came from high danger areas in the games that I tracked. But having 52% of your shots come from medium danger areas is pretty promising, especially for a center. Again, I think his best assets are going to be away from the opposing team's net, but his shot is pretty good, and he is able to bulldoze his way to dangerous areas and try to get his shot off from there. So with some more strength on his frame, a little bit of refinement when it comes to skating around the ice, combined with his passing game and how subtle and discreet it can be, I think there could be a nice offensive piece here if things break right. If he can get more aggressive and push towards the front of the net more often and try to get those greasier goals, then there could be even more offensive potential to unlock. But he was never the type of person to strike me as going so deep in the offensive zone with the puck that he gets hemmed in back there and he faces an odd man rush coming the other way. He plays a little bit more conservatively than that, and with his lack of overall mobility, he kind of needs to. So I question his goal scoring ability, but if things break right, there could be a good player here. So in the shoot category, I'm giving him a 2B. He was consistently getting good shot attempts from medium danger areas in a men's league playing some serious minutes. He did show that he can play aggressively, get to the middle of the ice, try to move pucks around in that area, and there was a nice promising profile here, but I still am questioning his ability to be a real bona fide NHL goal scorer. So the way we wrap up these videos is we look at the best part of the player's game, the good part of a player's game, and the not so good part of a player's game. With Anton Lundell, the best part of his game is if you like the idea that defense wins championships, Lundell is your guy. I totally understand why people with that line of thinking have him up in the top 3, 4, or 5 of this year's draft. He's a really intelligent, pace-controlling player with a strong sense of defensive responsibility and a great mind for maintaining possession and battling at both ends of the ice to keep the puck on his team's stick. He's not selfish, and he's responsible to the point where I think coaches are going to love this guy right from the moment he's drafted. The good part of Lundell's game is that discretion with his passing that we talked about. He isn't the flashiest passer, and yes, his pass completion rates aren't great, his dangerous passing percentages aren't super high, but he does what he can to maintain possession when pucks are coming at him from the defensive zone. So once he starts hitting his target more and maybe getting a little bit more aggressive with the puck in the offensive zone, there could be some nice potential to unlock here. He did start to produce more and more as the season went on in the Liga, and I think that came from more confidence and a more willingness to push to those dangerous areas. If that trend continues, I think there could be a real nice player here at both ends of the ice with underrated offensive ability. The not so good part of his game is a little bit complicated. If I'm an NHL team, it really comes down to how much work I want to put into developing this player. In my opinion, I think there are other players in this range of the draft that might have some defensive downsides, but have more flash and offense and skill to their game that I think a lot of teams always wish they had more of. His skating is not great. I'd say his ability to control the puck on his own stick is inconsistent to good, but I do think there are a few players in this range that can skate better and control a puck better than he can. Defensive responsibility aside, that's something that I think teams might be looking for more of at the top 10. And if they're looking for players like Lundell to fill out their roster, they better have a lot more offensive talent on their roster to start with, because Lundell, I think, has quite a bit of work to do to get to that point. And trying to be as reasonable as I can, considering all the players available in the top 10 here, you have to think about what you expect him to be at his peak in the NHL level. And I have a really hard time seeing him being a reliable #1 center in the National Hockey League. A very, very good defensively responsible second line center, I could certainly see. A player you could have on a championship winning team that you can put out with 3 minutes left in a Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final just to tell him not to let a goal go in the net. Sure, that's a player that certainly carries some value. But in terms of driving offense and catalyzing teammates in the NHL, I have a hard time thinking he's going to have as much offensive production as some other guys in this range. So overall, I'm giving Lundell a 1C. I think there's a really nice profile here for a reliable two-way center with some nice offensive tools and a strong sense of defensive responsibility who could just be a great play facilitator on any NHL team. NHL teams need players like Lundell, but to me it's just going to be a question of how do you value that type of a player. It's hard to find players like him that are as refined as he is at his age, but as he ages and everyone else in this draft class ages, where is he going to stand when we look back on this draft in 5 or 10 years? But looking at him right now, Lundell is a player that you just have to respect. He plays extremely efficiently on the ice. He's a really admirable player, especially if you're a person who really loves to study this sport. All kinds of situations he'd go in and I wouldn't expect him to come out with control of the puck, and there he was. All kinds of situations he'd be far away from play, but just bearing down on opponents, applying pressure, pushing them up against the boards, trying to turn play around offensively, and just doing these little things to help push play positively. I think he has the potential to be about a 40-60 offense to defense split two-way center in the National Hockey League. It's just going to be a question of who's picking and where, what exactly they're looking for, and what they've already got in their system. So that's it for this Scouching Report. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, you could click all the buttons you see below me so you never miss another one. If you really liked it, you could subscribe on Patreon, where you get early access to videos, access to data sheets for drafted and undrafted prospects across all NHL teams, as well as plenty of other goodies. Or you could pick up some merchandise from the Teespring shop, where 50% of all proceeds go to the Women's Sports Foundation. So that's it, and we'll see you in the next one.